Yeah, here we go. So yeah, thank you so much for making time for my presentation today, and apologies for the technical hiccup, and also for my voice. I had a bit of a cold, so apologies for that. My name is David Tsetse, and I am the chair of the CSD webinar group. But I have a full-time employment, and I also run a small impact, small insight, big impact. So the presentation I'm going to give to you today, it's on beyond PDCA, which we all know. And you thinking that I have developed and also applied over the years, and to share with you what it really means and where it started from. So it's not about ignoring the PDCA, which we all know it's very useful, but it's about how we can improve it. So this is the outline for my presentation today. So first, I'll start with the context of why we need to move beyond PDCA, and also the current thinking that I am presenting at SIDA. I'll move on to introduce the SIDA framework, and then continue with how SIDA is applied in different contexts at the tactical level, strategic level, and also at the operational level. I will then look at how other sectors are actually using it or will apply it in case we have to work across different levels. And then I would summarize or end with a couple of key takeaways for all of us, not only for leaders, for all of us. And then the presentation will end with my contacts, and if you want more information. First, before I start, I just want to make it clear that what I present here, it's my own opinion. It doesn't represent the opinions of my current employer. And whatever you take out of this, you have to apply it considering the context and also your professional discretion. So first, why do we have to look at all this? Continuous improvement, as we all know, it's everywhere. We all do our best to improve what we do in different forms and in different shapes. But then there's still a lot of areas that we need to work on. Some problems, we do address them, but those problems even end up creating other problems. Yes, there are some learnings that we get, but in most cases, I would say the improvement that we get out of whatever actions we take are not what we intend to achieve in most cases. But yet we consider them as improvements. So that's a good question. So the question then is, how do we actually improve and not just going around in circles, trying to do the same thing over and over again? So that's my introduction reflection for all of you to think about. So the current, the limitations of the current PDA that we have, that is the main thing. There are good sides of it, more than the limitations that I have to admit. But there are some areas that I feel that we need to look at. If you take the PDCA, the main steps are for us to plan, act or do, and then we check, and then after that we act on what we do. So those are the 4 critical steps that we need to take as part of the PDCA process. But in most cases, we consider it as a process that is very procedural, a lot of rules and regulations. So there's less flexibility in terms of what we need to do in some instances. I must say there are options or there are outliers in the application of this, but in most cases, there's less flexibility in terms of what you need to do. And I also think that the focus of the framework, the PDCA framework, it's mainly on activities. Yes, there are other, I would say, strategic angles of dimensions of it, but in most cases, I would say the focus is on activities. And if it happens that way, what it tells us that there are other aspects of the areas that we want to improve that we are missing. In other words, we tend to approach it in some form in a very shallow way, I must say. That is still subject to interpretation anyway. And in most cases, what we get, it's more of a repetition. So this is the framework that we are all conversant with, and these are the different steps that I wouldn't bore you with going to what each step means, because I want to believe all of us on this call or this webinar knows how to use this. But again, what I mentioned earlier on, the main challenge with this framework is that we assume that the world is simple, but then the world is complex. Problems are complex. So there is that issue of predictability and stability in what we do. So if we take this approach and then superimpose the complexity of activities on it, then this, in my opinion, PDCA becomes a bit less effective in terms of helping us address or improve situations. So, what are the complexities and then uncertainties that we have or we face in the implementation of the PDCA? We all know that the different, if we do a flow chart, for example, there are connections between different actions, different problems, and that it depends on you, the person engaging in that analysis, what you really want to achieve and where you want to stop with your interpretation. So there are three key things that I believe are complex that the PDCA doesn't fully address that we need to also take into account. All because systems are very complex and we need to also look at those angles. The first one is the independent system, how the different components of problems, processes, and systems that we want to improve are related. So we cannot deal with one in isolation, but we have to look at all, but at the same time define our boundaries. The next one, it's the changing environment that we have. Even if you look at what is happening now in this modern global space, there are things that are changing within seconds, minutes, and all frameworks will have to be dynamic or created in such a way that interpretations and actions are left to the individual to be able to ensure that there is alignment with context changes. That is something that, and it's not an easy task, I must say. And also the third point is it's how to predict outcomes. Yes, we have models, we have programs that are able to fairly or accurately predict outcomes. But when it comes to qualitative analysis, for example, those predictions are more or less accurate. So that's also an angle that we have to look at. If you have the numbers, you'll be able to sort of do a good prediction. But when you don't have the numbers and you have to assume a lot of variables, then the whole process becomes complex. So these are the complexities, in my opinion, that PDCA does not effectively or holistically address. That we have to look at how best we can get all these incorporated in our continuous improvement actions. So what I am putting forward or trying to sort of create and give space for thinking is that there is the need for us to always step back and ask a lot of critical questions when we are faced with an action or something that we want to improve. We just don't start with planning as the first stage. So that is my first point of departure, that we need to do a lot of reflection before we even start putting pen and paper on what a plan really is. And these reflections are asking ourselves what exactly are we trying to improve? And will that improvement, for instance, matter in the context and in the case that we are looking at it? These are things that we need to reflect on before we even. And I say also we need to do deep thinking here. And basically what I mean here, it's more of strengthening our interpretation of the context within which we work. Because if you do that, then you have a better understanding of why that particular issue is what it is and why we need to improve it. And with that, you should be able to know the best way to address or propose improvements for that. And then the third point that I also feel is sometimes choices makes a lot of difference. So we need to be a bit more wise in terms of what we need or what we want to choose or do. And that can only be done if we ask these critical questions that I posed earlier. What exactly are we trying to achieve? Does it really matter? And then what is the context telling me? So these are the things that you need to think about. I must admit, it's not an easy fix, but the more you do it, the more I believe it will become a bit more easy for you. So with this initial insight, then you are in a better position to think because you're already armed or you already have a lot about the context, the why, and also how critical that particular issue or problem is to the continuous improvement process. So that helps you to think better, to also make quicker and accurate decisions. And if you're able to do those two, then of course you are in some way guaranteed better results, in my opinion. So that's where the impact of SIDA comes in. So, and with that comes all the issues or all the qualities of a better results, which is you are able to simplify complexity, you have good performance indicators, and you're able to measure progress. And when there's a dip, you're also able to identify that quickly and make sure you put in place agile or adaptive measures that will help you stay on course. So that's the rationale behind that, for example. And then in terms of choices, how do you do? How do you react or how do you lead? Uh, First of all, it's very important to be clear in terms of what you do. And this will definitely come to you if you spend a lot of time at the first stage trying to does it really matter? Answer those questions. And then you have clear idea of what exactly you need to do, where you need to go, who you need to engage, what type of tools you need to use in a particular context to improve that situation. And of course, your confidence level will also be boosted as well. And with all that, we all know that comes with better results because people will perform systems to run well and processes will be followed, SOPs will be used and not shelved. So leadership in this particular case is and you can only do that when you're better armed with a deeper analysis of what the situation is. And then you'll be able to make sure all others will also follow you, learning from how you've done it and how you are going to do it in the future. So basically, this is, I would say, the overview or the simplified flow of the SIDA framework. You start by sensing what exactly it's around me, what the issues are, how do I relate to the issues, what will make sense, and what is informing the issue. Then you have all that insight. Then the next step, as I mentioned earlier, is for you to sit down and do a good interpretation based on deep thinking or critical thinking to be able to know what is right to produce the best solution for you. And doing that, in as much as you have the options ready, you are tasked with making the wise decision, which is which decision will make or will produce the best result for you in that particular context. And as you do that, you'll be able to sort of adjust and then improve for the next stage as well. So that's basically what this is the main overview of the SIDA framework. The key takeaway, it's like we don't have to treat continuous improvement as a checklist, more or less. It has to have, I would say, a flexible and dynamic systems approach where people are free to sort of focus on changing mindset and having a better understanding of context and relating to those contexts to be able to define solutions that are more adaptive and more useful in a particular context. So what I'm going to do now from this slide going is to give you a bit of a deeper explanation of the different steps. So the first step, which is the sense, as I mentioned earlier, that you start with asking yourself or identifying what matters. And then in this case, you don't have to do it you have to be real. You have to be honest with yourself, making sure that whatever you identify will improve the situation that you are trying to address. And that means you should not just look at what is happening around you, but what you think will happen in the future. There are a lot of near guesses that you will have to make predictions to be able to know what are the possible outcomes should you not address that particular issue, and also should you address it. So some issues end up creating more problems for us, so we need to look at it. The other thing you also need to do is to be able to sense things, it's to listen. You need to make sure you develop a sense of listening to so that you'll be able to discern and have a different perspective of what others also have to bring to the table. We all come from different angles or different areas of expertise. So if you listen, then you'll be able to use those insights to enrich your thinking in terms of what actions you need to take to be able to address or improve the situation. In data, we all know that good data leads to good outcomes, bad data leads to bad outcomes. So we need to spend time collecting, reviewing, improving, so that at least what the data that we use for our modeling or even for our interpretations or analysis, we are confident it's defensible and it's something that speaks to the true situation of the problem that we are trying to improve. And the last point, which is also very important, is after you've done all that and you feel like you are confident in terms of what the situation is, you shouldn't stop there. You keep yourself still being active, scanning the system, making sure that you are very much aware of what is happening. Given the fact that systems are complex and we know things can change within a minute, second, and a day. So that awareness is very important to be able to have a clear sense of what is happening and what is likely to happen. The second step, which it's to interpret after you've sensed everything based on all the information and analysis that you done, then you need to interpret that. And that involves you need to be able to answer the question that you started with. Does it really matter? And of course, you have options. There are different things that will come up. So those are part of the process of getting to the final solution. So you need to embark on that process, not only from your point of view, but taking into account or using certain tools that will guide your thinking or your interpretation. And that I leave to all of you, that you know which tools are best for you to be able to help you interpret your problem. And then the next step that you also need to look at is, after you've done all that, you need to present or position your interpretation within the context that you are actually doing. Because in most cases, when you interpret something, we tend to forget by the time you finish your interpretation, the context, maybe there has been some changes within the context that you have to update. So you have to be aware about that and make sure that it's up to date. More importantly, interpretation should be informed by data. You need to make sure you have the right data to do to support what you interpret. And always keep asking yourself, does this make sense? Does this matter? These are key phases that you need to be reflecting on at the stage of interpretation to be able to make sure that all aspects, if not covered, are still within your view. And then the third step is for you to make a decision. At this point, you're well informed, prepared, but then making a decision, has its consequences. So you need to make sure you spend time to reflect and weigh all the options. Don't just take one option and then go and run with that. Make sure you weigh all the options and then decide on what is the right way to address the problem or improve the situation. Some people use weight, but you weigh the options that you have. But I would say just make sure it is grounded in reality. The decisions that you make are grounded in reality. And if that happens, when reality changes, your decisions, your decision or the outcome of your decision will not be that much affected. So you need to make sure you have that. And you also have to consider that the main purpose of the decision that you are making. And this ties back to the first question that you try to answer from this process, which is, does this really matter? If we are able to do a deep dive into that analysis, the purpose of what you're trying to achieve will come out very clear to you. And your decision making will be somehow easy for you. And if you make the decision, let me just if you make the decision, you need to live with the outcome. Own the outcome, no matter what it is. And if there are course corrections that you need to do them. That's part of it. You cannot make a decision and then immediately try to adjust your decision just based on signals that are actually, I would say, a bit negative. Sometimes you have to go to the negative signals, address them quickly, head on, to be able to achieve a better result. So if you decide, make sure you own them, because that decision that you will make definitely will be informed by your interpretation and your sense. And so that's a key thing to always remember. And then, of course, after you've done everything, you've made the decision, as I pointed out earlier, there will be headwinds. Definitely, there will be headwinds that you have to deal with. But in this case, you also have to make sure you have a good approach to how dealing with these headwinds. Some of them you have to be very practical in terms of how you do them. And that's where the results that you are getting will play a role. You need to look at what actually worked and what did not work, or what is working or what is not working. That will give you an idea whether you should face the headwind directly, or you need to sort of create a detour. Because let's take, for example, what you have decided on is not working. That calls for a detour in terms of how you approach things. So these are things that you need to look at this particular stage. And as you do that, you also need to make sure you are actually writing down the lessons that you are taking out of this process, because there will be another time that you will have to go through the whole cycle again, and you'll be able to use those lessons to improve the whole process. And then we all know that if you are not able to measure anything, you will not be able to assess progress. So measurement in terms of how the progress you achieve over time will determine the level of adjustment you have to do. So that is also another aspect that you need to consider as well. And if you're able to do this and close the loop, you realize that there will be some growth and there will also be some areas that will need adjustment. So with all that I've just gone through, which are the 4 steps of SIDA, you can do your best or do all the analysis or address all the situations in all those stages. But if you don't have good leadership or a clear path to what exactly you are doing, the results will not be what exactly you expect. It is very important for you to lead with clarity, and that can only happen, in my opinion, if you have gone through these processes. And if you go through them, you will definitely have a better idea of where you're going and what will take you there. And then you'll be able to know the different steps that you take, where to step and where not to step. And that also gives you confidence in terms of the type of decisions that you make as you move ahead. And just to be clear, that it's not only for leaders, but it's even for everybody that embarks on a continuous improvement exercise. So the overall takeaway from this presentation that I think it's key. If you forget everything that I've just talked about today, at least slide 15 is something that will speak or summarize everything. First, you need to make sure you ask yourself, what exactly does it really matter? And then you look at the meaning of it, and that tells us whether interpretation, other things you have to do, and then making a good or wise decision. That's where you choose wisely. And as I mentioned, if you decide on something, you need to stick to it. Don't assume that it will always be good news. When bad times come, address them head on. Based on the results that you are achieving, the results will determine what direction your adjustment will take. And finally, you always have to look at the results and make sure that you are taking continuous, simple steps to improve what needs to be improved and what you need to also leave. You need to also make sure that is clearly identified. So this is slide 15 summarizes the final takeaway for everyone if you forget all the other things that I've been talking about today. So I just want to, this slide presents, illustrate, or just sort of shows how if you use the SIDA framework and if you don't use SIDA framework, the difference between the two. So I wouldn't read them, but I guess you see, it gives you a clear interpretation or analysis of what the difference are. The SIDA one, there's less guessing because you've done a lot of deep thinking. And then what you're doing, there's a lot of time spent on interpretation. So before you make a decision, you are very sure what you're doing. And then if you make that decision because you're well armed with facts and figures, you've done a good analysis, you are not, you are very, confident. You have the gravitas to be able to face or defend your decisions and taking into account the different actions. And if you face headwinds that I talked about, you wouldn't be surprised because you knew that they were going to come, you were going to face headwinds anyway. So you definitely have some fallback or backup plans for that. But in the other case, I would argue it's not always visible in situations like that. Yeah. So slide 17, what I try to do here is to illustrate the application of SIDA at a strategic level, where you have to look at long-term outcomes, impact, how do you use it, less of day-to-day activities, more of strategy development to be able to inform. And this is how its application sort of comes to life. You sit down, you do a lot of reflection, you look at the big picture, and make sure that you have the right data sets and you observe trends, and that will inform you what the situation and what you want to achieve in a couple of years. Then you crunch the numbers, both qualitative and quantitative. And then not only just looking at the numbers, but looking at how those numbers will be able to give you a good growth or projection over the years. Then you develop your strategic plan or path, bearing in mind that will definitely face headwinds, but you know that you are well prepared for that. And if they come, you face them. Those that you have to face head on, you will do that. Those that you don't have to, you let them, you drop them so that you'll be able to achieve your result. So this is how the strategic application of the framework looks like. And I'm sure that will inspire some of you to see how best you can apply it. The other level is the operational level, where this is an example of where logistics or operations where the SIDA framework can easily be applied. You will notice that at this level, there's a lot of number crunching that is involved in both the sensing, the interpretation, and the decision making. Less of futuristic or long-term planning. That's where you have to be on top of everything. Make sure you don't have any gaps that you don't understand, and with that, then you'll be able to take immediate actions to be able to address whatever problems that you would encounter at the operational level as well. And then this is more the lower level, to the tactical level, where you have to use the SIDA framework. You notice that this involves a lot of visualization that you need to illustrate, and behind that is more of identifying patterns, making sure connecting the dots, which dots will lead to which particular intervention to be able to get the best outcome. I would say this stage or this application requires a lot of time relatively to the other ones at the sensing stage, because this is like a day-to-day activity. So when you plan and get an outcome for this, you either execute within days or weeks. For the other ones, there's a bit of a time difference in terms of how that is done. So, but then the underlying principles or requirements for all the three applications are the same. So, in closing, what I mentioned, clarity is very important, and you can't get clarity when your data analysis or your understanding of what exactly you're trying to improve is weak. You need to make sure you understand that is fully understood. And that comes with confidence as well. You have the gravitas to be able to make correct decisions. You stand by them, you face the headwinds, and then you'll be able to demonstrate that to your team, and you all grow together as a unit or an office or an agency. So this, in conclusion, I've written an article on this framework on LinkedIn. I'm actually writing a very technical article again, which I would send to for publication. And you have done a YouTube on this particular framework as well. So you can reach me or read more about this framework through these different channels. So let me know how you apply the framework in one way or the other. And also, if there are weaknesses that you feel like, hey, this has not addressed, this is something that you don't understand, or it's been interpreted in a way that doesn't speak to continuous improvement, shoot me an email or reach out to me and let me know. Thank you for your time. And then, if you have questions, let me know. I'll just try and see if I can hide. And then watch the chat. Thank you. Hello? Any questions for me? Oh, no questions. I just see that. Yeah, okay. Oh, SIDA Tom, thanks so much. Yeah, okay. No, yeah. Okay. If there are no questions, thanks so much for your time. And again, sorry for the technical hitch at the start of this presentation. I hope you found it useful, and then please reach out to me if you want to read more about it or you want to apply it in one way or the other. All the best, and let's stay connected and learn from each other. Thank you for your attention. Take care. Bye-bye.